WUMC HD3 Detroit, KMPS HD3 Seattle, WBMX HD3 Boston.
And on AOL Radio and Yahoo Launchcast. Psychic Radio is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Call now 248-545-SOUL. New skyradio.com.
How common is it for a police officer to have a UFO sighting? How do they deal with it? As people call for government to spill the beans on UFOs, is that necessarily a good idea?
Hello there, and welcome to the 450th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm Ben, and those jarring questions came from my co-host and partner in the paranormal, my dad. So we return to the UFO realm this evening with a very distinguished guest.
Gary Heseltine is a sort of UFO renaissance man for nearly 25 years at least 25 years of police experience. He is a retired detective constable with the British Transport Police. He is also a screenwriter, author, publisher, and editor of a brand new UFO, the brand new UFO Truth magazine. His interest stems from a childhood sighting in his native Lincolnshire in 1975 when he was 15. I was considerably older than that. He became an active researcher in late 2001 when he started work on with the PRUFOs, I guess you pronounce it, the acronym for Police Reporting UFO Sightings database. After years of research, he has assembled hundreds of cases going back to 1901 and involving over 800 British police officers. Gary was a regular contributor to UFO Magazine and later started his own online magazine called UFOmonthly.com, which ran for 41 issues. Gary then became deputy editor of UFO Data magazine. The online UFO Truth magazine debuted only last month at UFOtruthmagazine.com. Gary was a great help during our own Return to Rendlesham radio series in 2010 and 2011, and he has appeared on many international radio and television shows. As a screenwriter, he is working on several movie and television projects, including a feature film about the Rendlesham Forest UFO incidents of 1980. He lectures regularly throughout the British Isles and in the U.S., including the National Press Club in Washington, where he was presented with a prestigious Disclosure Award by UFO expert Steve Bassett, who has also been a guest on the show several times.
So Gary Heseltine, welcome back to Behind the Paranormal.
Thank you. That was a glowing introduction.
Well deserved.
We try. So I understand you're working with Colonel Charles Halt on the Rendlesham movie, and he was deputy commander of the nearby air base at the time of the UFO incidents. So how's that going?
Well, it's interesting. I certainly think that because I've just retired, I retired as of March the 31st.
Congratulations.
Thank you. One of the things, I've retired early. I could have stayed a lot longer, but I retired early because I want to devote the rest of my life to the UFO subject, and I feel the time is right now. But going back to your question, I only retired on March the 31st, but one of my intentions for the rest of 2013 is to, now the shackles are off, as it were, and I was under a lot of pressure from work, I was under a lot of restrictions, I was disciplined because of my beliefs, that people aren't generally aware of this in the last few years of my research, so that's one of the reasons why I left. But now that I've retired, I can say anything, do anything, so I will be much more proactive in trying to seek interest for the film. Where we are at the moment is I've worked with Colonel Holt, retired. He was then, at the time of the incident, the Lieutenant Colonel. I've worked with him for over 5 years in a dialogue where I've written a film screenplay. Well, I've now got two versions. I've now got a feature film, character-driven story, a theatrical film, as it were, for the cinema, and two, also I've got a version which is a blow-by-blow docudrama kind of TV series. I've been putting this out and developing it over 5 years, and it's now got to the stage where quite a few screenwriters that I've put it to are saying that you've got two definite things there to work on. You've definitely got a film version now, and you've definitely got a series. So really, it's at the stage now. When I was in the police, I only chipped away at the screenwriting of the story for obvious reasons. I was a detective, and you had to work around the clock, sometimes, and that was your primary job, over and above my PRUFO research, etc., etc. But obviously, I knew that in retirement, then I could pursue it a lot more. But I've also got it to the standard where I'm now happy to say it's there or thereabouts, to go to production companies, producers, directors, etc. What I would say is that since I've retired, people who I've met in the media, shall we say, over the last 3 or 4 years, have now come back out of the blue and contacted me because I've obviously realised I've retired and now got more freedom, and are asking for updates where we are with the script. So basically, it's in an early stages, but I do sense that there is maybe much more of an opportunity this year to make some kind of breakthrough. It's there, it's available, and if you think about, I've 2 things that I have done. One, in preparation for pitching this, is that I've employed a graphic artist to do some artwork, concept artwork, posters, key scenes, some storyboarding, which would obviously come in handy. I can also tell you that I've got a very well-known international film composer who writes his films music, ready to do the soundtrack, as it were. I've also been developing a business plan, because if you think about the Rendlesham case, it's kind of unique that in the sense that the base is still there, it's closed, but it's now a business park. But essentially, the runway is still there, all the major buildings are there, all the hangars are there, and one of the key places that would be in the film is the weapons storage area is still there. The tower's still there within the weapons storage area, which is a key feature at one point. The forest is still there. The farmer's field is still there. The second farmer's field is...
We were just there ourselves.
So that's what I'm saying. The infrastructure is already there. So in a sense, that's half the battle if you were trying to work out costs on a production, etc. So altogether, I think we're now looking at quite a powerful pitch if we can meet the right people. And I know that you have a very large listenership, shall we say, and who knows who's listening. But I would certainly be happy to speak to anyone. But I do think that if there's going to be a breakthrough, it'll be in the next 12 months.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Well, we'll certainly keep tabs on it with you as we go and give you all the support we can on that. It just sounds terrific. It's high time someone did that. Well,
the reason, and I've always said this, is whilst obviously a lot of American people will associate with Roswell and say that's a fantastic case, which it is, it's a case that's very old now. Many of the participants have sadly passed away, etc., etc. And also there was a very good TV movie done by Paul Davids. But the Rendlesham case is a little bit different in the sense that we now have confirmed UFO activity over 3 successive nights, which doesn't happen very often. We've got documentary evidence, and I come at this from an evidential police point of view. Sure. We've got documentary evidence in the form of the Holt Memorandum. Well, how many military documents have come forward over 60 years where the deputy base commander of what was a nuclear facility says that in the first paragraph there were some of his men came across a landed triangular craft. In the second paragraph say that there were trace evidence left, indentations, Geiger counter readings, etc., etc. And in the third paragraph actually says that he himself saw multiple UFOs on the night he was out. So that doesn't happen very often.
Not at all.
So for me, that's what raises it above Roswell, in my opinion.
And I tend to agree. I think in the Roswell situation, everything, it was important, it was significant. Everything is secondhand, however. Whereas, as you say, in the Rendlesham case, the eyewitnesses are still there. So, and as you know, and you were one of the many, not one of the eyewitnesses, but you were one of the folks who appeared on our series on that, that involved just about everyone, every major player in that case. So that sounds like a wonderful project, and we'll be following you all through that.
Alrighty, so can you tell us about the sighting that first interested you in UFOs?
Yeah, my original sighting was when I was 15. I was with my then girlfriend. It was a lovely, warm August night. Not a cloud in the sky, one of those balmy summer nights, which you don't actually get very often in England. So we were walking along what was a narrow, long footpath that divided a series of gardens. In England, you call them allotments. I don't know what you call them in the US, but it's like people work on their own little patches, vegetable patches, that kind of thing.
And community gardens.
Yeah, and on the other side was what you would say high school fields. It was total darkness, but in the distance we could see housing effectively at the end of the fields and at the end of the gardens. So as we're walking effectively down this narrow path between the two, we become aware that there is an extremely bright white light at about 60-degree angle ahead of us, travelling from our right to left against a backdrop of lots of stars, not a cloud. It was at a relatively low altitude. I wouldn't have said no more than 5,000 feet, but there was no noise. We watched it, and as the object passed by us, if you can imagine the path stretching out in front of us, the object passing over us, so then we were behind its flight path. Well, as soon as we were behind its flight path, all the housing in the distance, there was a power cut. Rightly or wrongly, the girl that I was with, who was called Dawn, I won't give her surname out and embarrass her, but her name was Dawn, but basically she became very frightened and immediately associated the light with somehow causing the power cut. Now, at that stage, we were just in awe watching this strange event. I had no interest in the subject up to that point. Well, as we watched, there was a second power cut in the housing behind its flight path. So basically, if you think back to Close Encounters of the Third Kind, there's a bit where Richard Dreyfuss, early on in the movie, is overlooking the town and sees the power grid going off.
Sure.
It was kind of like that, but it predated the movie. Now, what happened was that I had my bicycle with me at the time, which I was pushing as we were walking back. So I said, get on the bike, and in a Lincolnshire term, we call it croggering. And so two of us were on the bike. I rushed and rode down the end of the alleyway, turned right a couple of times, and eventually got to a house which was in complete darkness. I dropped her off and said, I'm going to try to get ahead of this light, because it was moving very slowly in the direction of my home in an area called Ashby, which is a suburb of Scunthorpe where I lived. And so basically that's what I did. I dropped her off and then rode like mad back down the same alleyway we had originally had the sighting. And eventually I get to this kind of bizarre situation where I'm in complete darkness, imagine total power failure, all housing in distance, and then by the corner near to where I lived, I could see that the lighting was on, the electricity was on. And as I got to that corner, I was able to look over on my right shoulder, and I have this distinct memory of looking over my right shoulder and noticing that the object was slightly behind me, moving very slowly. And so in a sense, because of the angle and the shortcut that I'd taken, I was now just ahead of it, and hence why the power was on, or so I reasoned. So basically, I remember glancing over to my right, seeing the object going round three corners from that corner where the light was on. I dropped my bike outside my front door. I rushed in to the front room where my parents were having a cup of tea, supper time. So I guessed it must have been anywhere between 8, half 9 in the evening. And I said, come outside, I think there's going to be a power cut caused by this strange light. And they just looked at me bemused, as you would, didn't move. Not surprising. So basically I just ran out through the hall, through the kitchen, out into the back garden, turned around to face back, looking at my house, just in time to see the object, which was now higher in altitude, but the same object moving silently above my rooftop. I was in the garden. I put my arm directly straight up above my head to create a 90-degree kind of thing. And as soon as that object moved past me, so I was then behind it, guess what? The entire area cut off, power cut. Now, how, from a second geographical position, could I predict a power cut? I can't. So basically, it told me then that light must have had some interaction with the power grid. because how could I predict that to the very moment?
Obviously,
that's what created my interest. Unfortunately, in 1975, pre-video, well, just prior to the Betamax and etc., the big cassettes coming in, video cassettes, VHS. All you could do when I tried to research anything, there was no documentaries on the TV in England at that time, so all I could do was go to a second-hand bookshop, and I kind of think this is part of the destiny as to what's led me on this strange path. Is the first book that I came across was by Donald Kehoe.
Oh, I'm so fascinated here. I forgot we have a break. So we'll be right back on Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on CBS New Sky Radio with Gary Heseltine. Stay with us.
Enlighten, empower, enrich. This is CBS Radio's The New Sky. New horizons, no boundaries.
I just want someone to save me. I'll always be there when you wait. You know I like to keep my cheeks dry today. So stay with me and I'll have it made. And I don't understand why I sleep all day. It's not sane. It's not sane. I just want someone to save me. I'll always be there when you wait. You know I like to keep my cheeks dry today. So stay with me.
Psychic Radio is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Call now 248-545-SOUL. NewSkyRadio.com. Believe.
Welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, and we are chatting with our wonderful guest, Gary Heseltine, about his harrowing adventures in... I can't think of another H word to describe UFOs, extraterrestrials, whatever.
Well, whatever, but Gary was describing his first experience at the age of 15. And Gary, please, before you were interrupted by the break, you were describing this sort of coming over your house and the power shenanigans going on. Please continue.
Yeah, well, as I say, once the power had gone out, we weren't on the phone. That's how backward I was, really. The nearest phone was about 10 minutes away in a shop.
I remember those days.
Yeah, well, it's hard for people to believe that, but literally, who would I have rang anyway? I mean, I didn't have a clue about the subject, and my parents just said, "No, it must be a coincidence." So I didn't even report anything, and I didn't even look in the paper the next day because they just kind of like poo-pooed it.
Mm-hmm.
But it must have resonated somewhere because in the next few weeks after that, as I said, the only thing I could really do was look for books, and I do look at. I'd never heard of the word synchronicity, but as my life has gone on in this subject, I've come across many things that have apparent synchronicity. And one of them, I think, is the fact that the first book that I found was by Donald Keough, and it was Flying Saucers Are Real. And straight away I came across a reference about not only were pilots chasing these things, and he was a major, and he'd written 5 books, it was his last book, and basically I came across this reference to power cuts during the New York blackout to UFOs. And,
yes. 1965 blackout?
Yeah, I think that was 65. And I thought, wow, this kind of validates possibly what I'd seen because, as I say, I had no interest whatsoever in the subject up to that point. But basically, how else could you explain it? How, from a second geographical position, could I predict to the very moment that it'd be a power cut? It's ridiculous. So that object must, by anybody's logical deduction, must have had some interaction with the power grid.
Yeah, apparently. I did want to ask you, and Ben's got another question here, but
I do indeed.
Yes, but when you were having that experience, and the reason I ask this question is because people very often will tell us that they feel when they're having an experience, particularly their first UFO experience, that it's somehow very personal. They feel some sort of connection. I remember one fellow in down near New York City told us that he felt as though he was being tested by this, and it was the similar situation to yours. It was over his house, and there were neighboring houses and this sort of thing. But he felt as though there was some sort of personal connection there. Did you ever have any feeling of that kind when you were?
The honest answer is no. Other than nervousness, perhaps wonderment, excitement, as you'd naturally feel when you see something that you can't explain.
Sure.
No, the basic answer is no. But I just knew that object caused the power cuts because how could I predict it? And I think when I came across the book and references to the 65 blackout, then it kind of validated that maybe these things were real. So I started then collecting books, and I soon gathered quite a 15, 20 book collection. But it was really, I think what's really strange is the fact that there's then a very big gap in my life. I think for the next, so from the age of, say, 15 to 18, I collected books, read everything I could. But I joined what was BUFORA, the British UFO Research Association, got my little card as an affiliate member. I once went to a UFO local group meeting, but to be fair, they all looked a bit crazy, so I didn't go. So I never got involved in any kind of active research. But in a strange kind of way, it's obviously been there in the back of my mind, because what's happened is that there's then a very big gap in my life, literally from the age of 18 until I would say the mid-1990s, when I come across this glossy magazine in a big famous W.H. Smith's outlet at Leeds Railway Station, and it was just looked like any other glossy magazine, and it was about UFOs, and I thought, wow, this subject has moved on a bit. I'd never seen that before, and it turned out to be UFO magazine by Graham Birdsall, who sadly passed away in 2003. But he was a great man, and that was a really very good, non-sensationalistic, scientific approach, common sense approach to the subject. Looked at the evidence of pilots, etc. And that's what really kicked off my modern interest. And the more I then delved and got the new set of books that had been written in that intervening 18 years, or 17, 18 years, basically I was still reading about pilots chasing UFOs and shooting at them, and space and radar operators and astronauts and cosmonauts making positive comments about ET reality. And I kept thinking, well, what the hell's happening? It doesn't make sense. Surely if a pilot knows where he's chasing, especially if he's in broad daylight, if not, he shouldn't be flying. But it was being ridiculed in the media. So basically, that second act then led me to start delving further. I then had a dream, which sounds crazy, but I had a dream.
Sounds crazy to us.
Well, I had a dream where I woke up with a very vivid scenario for a blockbuster Hollywood-style film based on what would cause the American government to finally reveal all it knew. And so it was that kind of storyline. And basically, I wrote a screenplay. I didn't have a clue about writing a screenplay. I'd never written a thing in my life. But within 6 weeks, I had the very first draft. And I'd worked out a beginning, middle, and an end, which is bizarre.
It is bizarre.
And so at the end of that, seeking validation, I then approached the editor of UFO magazine, Graham Birdsall, and said, nervously, will you just read this? You'd probably think it's rubbish. But he read it, and he actually rang me up about 3 weeks later, out of the blue, and said it's brilliant, it'd make a great film, blah, blah, blah. And so again, it was pulling me into the subject. He then said, well, why don't you come to a conference, listen to some people? And there, as it happened, I listened to John Mack at a conference.
The Harvard professor who believed in abductions, yeah.
So I just felt myself being pulled into the subject. And then it was really just a question of, well, I want to get involved, but what can work around me? I'm no good to a group because you can't rely on me because I'm a detective and you work strange hours. So I figured I had to do something by myself. So I then had a second dream, and I don't usually remember my dreams, but the dream was write about police officers, write about what you know, which is actually what many people say about writers anyway, write about what you know. Yeah. And so basically that's what I did. I went back to Graham Birdsall and said, look, I've had this idea for a database, unofficial database for police officers to report UFOs. What do you think? Can I write an article for you? And he went, yeah, because obviously he was trying to get any credibility, and I was a detective, and so it was a credible source. So he said, yeah, you can write an article. Now, I'd never written anything that had been published in my life. So for me, it was a major thrill in January 2002 when that article was published. And hey, presto, all these years later, I've suddenly been given evidence on behalf of police officers all around the world at the citizens' hearings, which was a couple of years ago, which was an incredible honour. So,
I wanted to ask about that too. But I'll give Ben a chance to continue with his questions here, though. But
well, we only have like 2 minutes left till the next break.
Well, that's true. So go ahead, Gary. Finish the story.
Well, I'm just saying that it's kind of, when I talk about synchronicities, it seems quite bizarre, but there's been specific steps in my life that have led me to the point of where I actually became involved in research.
So in a way, perhaps there was a personal connection.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I can't rule that out, but I'm not aware of it at the time. But something obviously very deep and profound happened enough to be awakened or to be laid dormant, ready to be awakened at some point when I was then ready as a mature man to get involved in the subject. And so that's why I've been drawn in. And I think if you speak to other researchers, you study this subject, the more you look at it, the more evidence that you find, the more you get pulled into it, and it gets under your skin, and that's exactly what's happened to me.
No, we do hear that, but it certainly sounds as though you got, fit like a glove as far as your situation was concerned.
Absolutely. Well, bizarre.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are going to take a break again. I'm sorry, there are a lot of breaks, but what we will do is be right back with Gary Heseltine. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on CBS New Sky Radio. Stick with us.
Enlighten, empower, enrich. This is CBS Radio's The New Sky. New horizons, no boundaries.
I don't know what to do. to you. Oh, I wanna talk to you. You could take a picture of something you see. In the future, where will I be? You could climb a ladder up to the sun, or write a song nobody had sung, or do something that's never been done. Are you lost or incomplete? Do you feel like a puzzle you can't find your missing piece? Tell me how you feel. Well, I feel like they're talking in a language I don't speak, and they're talking it to me. So you don't know where you're going, but you wanna talk, and you feel like you're going where you've been before. You tell anyone who listens that you feel ignored, and nothing's really making any sense at all. Let's talk, let's talk, let's talk, let's talk.
Psychic Radio is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Call now 248-545-SOUL. New skyradio.com. Believe.
I guess I'm doing the intro again. Welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. And with us is Gary Heseltine, and we are going to continue with our contemporary questions. That's
Yes.
not-
Well, let's give Gary a chance to talk about his website and
Right.
stuff first, and then we can take it away.
Yes.
Gary, please take it away.
All right. One of the reasons, like I said early on in the introduction, one of the reasons why I've decided to quit now is because something tells me that the time is right to do it now. And basically, about a year ago, I was over at the EXO Politics Conference in Liverpool doing a lecture, and I came up with the idea of floating past some of the speakers that were there, the idea that in retirement, I was already thinking about retirement, that I'd like to create an online magazine featuring what I would consider most, if as many of the top researchers in the world, if they would take part. And they all said it was a good idea. And I'd had the idea of creating the magazine. It'll be bi-monthly, and the website is now up and running, and it's all you have to do is put UFO Truth magazine into Google, and it'll take you straight there. And basically, the website's all up and running, ready to take subscriptions. The actual first issue is not out until the 25th of June. There is a little sampler 9-page magazine that you can just look at if you wish, download for free. The magazine will cost in English money £4 an issue, so but over a course of a year we're doing a special early offer, basically £16 for first year. So you say, so it's not a lot of money, but the reason why I've decided to charge for an online magazine is because what I want to do, which is a bit different. A third of all monies raised through subscriptions I will pledge for UFO causes. I'm not after making money. I'm not after fame and fortune in that sense. I want to help the subject. So a third of all monies raised through subscriptions will be set aside for UFO causes. What I mean by UFO causes, initially the money will be used as a funding mechanism to provide venues in the UK to promote the subject in the UK, because that's necessary first. We need to establish that and take it around the country, as it were. But beyond that, the more people subscribe to the magazine, the bigger the pot of money is. For example, if you had, say, 5,000 people, that would generate roughly £100,000 in UK money. So that's £33,000 in the pot. And basically, it's not going to take all that for the UK. So basically, if there's a MUFON want to do a forensic test on a cattle, on a dead cow, and they need the money, then in theory they can contact me and say, would you give us a contribution or help towards the cost? That's what I mean by the more people we do it, the more people it benefits the subject. Now, what I've done is I've approached many of the world's top researchers, and if you look at the list of people that are going to be regular columnists, it's extensive. A.J. Javard in Brazil, Julio Chamorro, who's a colonel in the Peruvian Air Force, or was retired. In Peru, you've got Pia Knudsen from Denmark, you've got Peter Robbins from the US, you've got people from Ireland, people from Australia, Bill Chalker from Australia. I've tried to make it as worldwide as possible to try to expand the readership. It's only going to be in English, but the idea is that if you're getting the top researchers to be on board, and there'll be guest contributions from the likes of Steve Bassett, Richard Dolan, Grant Cameron, George Filer. I saw him at the Citizens' hearings and asked him if I could use some of his material from Filer's files. He said yes, as long as you credit it to him, which I obviously would do. There's a whole host of people. Just have a look at the list. His friend Robert Salas, with his obviously his nukes stories, etc., etc. So Ted Phillips, the ground trace specialist, he's now on board. So there's
a
whole
last week.
So it's a long list now, and the idea is that this will hopefully be the biggest and best selection of top current researchers in the world of ufology, so they can all write. And the beauty is that there's no overheads as such, and the technology has changed. When I did a little online magazine after Graham Birdsall had died in 2003. I did UFOmonthly.com. I didn't have a clue about putting a magazine together, didn't have a clue about graphics, etc., etc. But I learned, and I did that.
It's very interesting. Speaking as among other things, a professional magazine editor, it's very attractive.
Well, but then what I'm saying is between 2004 and 2007, when I first did it, people would say to me, I don't like reading off a computer screen. Or can you print it out? And then, of course, you get all the associate costs with printing, which are exorbitant. But now, with the invention of tablet and smartphone technology, people are happy to read off their iPhone, off to the tablet, their iPod, etc. So now there's not a problem, and the page turns just like a book, and everybody's happy. So the time is now. Well, if you've no overheads, that means you can devote that third of monies for causes. And all the people are doing it for free, the columnists, etc., until such points as trigger points are reached. And that's common sense, that basically if the magazine reaches 1,000, it will trigger a payment level for a columnist story. And similarly, if you reach another level, it will trigger more. So it's on that kind of basis. So it's not the money is not really for me. It's about trying to make a difference and trying to create a magazine, universal magazine. Now, no disrespect to other magazines. There's some printed magazines all around the world. That's fine. Let them get on with it. But I don't think any of them, having looked at their columnist lists, are as strong as what I've put together. So if you really are into the subject, these are the current people, many of which were at the citizens' hearings, which I think we're going to be talking about shortly.
Yes.
So this is really, I'm hoping, going to be the top magazine.
Very good. Ben, take it away.
Alrighty, so you mentioned, actually I think it was before the break, about the citizens' hearings. So do you want to talk about that a little bit? What it's about, and what it's what's the word? What it's about. There we go.
Well, the citizens' hearings were put together by Steve Bassett at PRG. I'm sure you've had Steve on several times. I think you did say he's been on many times.
Oh yes. Yeah.
And basically, the idea was, if Congress won't hold open hearings, then the people will. And so, yes, while it was a mock hearing. It was done before a former senator and 5 former congressmen and women. And it was held at the prestigious Washington Press Club 2 weeks ago. It ran for a week. I was one of the witnesses. There were about 40 witnesses, which was a mixture of world-renowned researchers and also pilots, etc., recounting their experiences. So it was a mixture, and basically it was done as a courtroom, a mock courtroom. And what I can tell you, having been a detective for many years, it achieved that brilliantly. And if you saw the impact of that, in terms of, I was there for virtually all of the sessions, and it really was just like a courtroom, and people had to take an oath to swear in their evidence before the Congress people and the senator, and basically it was all done very formally and properly, and all the evidence was given very solemnly, as you would do in a court of law. So from that point of view, it was as near as damn it. And having been obviously in court many, many times, I can obviously vouch for the fact that it was very close. The only thing that was different is you don't get the clapping at the end of a lecture in a normal courtroom. But basically people should have had about 10 minutes each to give their testimony about what they were going to say. In my case, Steve asked me to speak about police officer sightings worldwide, because obviously the database I have is fairly unique. There isn't another one in the world as such, run by either a serving or retired police officer. There is another one in Australia which is pretty good, but it's not by a serving or retired officer. So basically he asked me, well, could you add on other cases from around the world? So I did some cases from America and some from Belgium, because you basically only had 10 minutes to give your word-for-word speech, which you'd obviously had to hand in prior to it. So they all had copies, all the panel members had copies, etc. And it was done very, very properly. And coming from that is, whilst it was disappointing that the mass media, mainstream media weren't there in numbers, it doesn't matter, because the bottom line was, here we are talking to a panel of a senator, former senator, and 6 congressmen and women, and their reaction over the week was pretty amazing. On the first day, at the end of hearing basically 6-7 hours of testimony, former Congresswoman Carolyn Kilpatrick, stood up and basically said, I'm blown away by this, and you've already, in one day's testimony, told me that we should have open congressional hearings. So, well, that was kind of a eureka moment, because it led to a spontaneous round of applause, and Steve came into the room and everybody's whatever. And that was, to be there, was actually had the kind of hairs on the back of your neck. And I think that was a significant moment. And by the end of the week, the panel all were in agreement that there should be congressional hearings, but also said that really the place to deal with this subject is to approach the UN. And I think that's what Steve is trying to get a motion together to approach the UN. But what we need is a country, just one country, to nominate it so we can get it to approach the UN. Now, I'm sure you're aware that the South American countries, China, and possibly Russia are far more open on the subject than what the American government is. So, I honestly believe that there is a chance, and that's all it is, a chance, but I think we're closer to that as a result of having those hearings, that we'll maybe get maybe 1, 2, 3 South American countries, I suspect, making motions to the UN. And once that happens, all it's going to do is trigger an already present agenda that was set in 1978 when the Grenada president, Eric Gary, last had a UN debate on it, which I think Stanton Friedman was involved in.
That raises all sorts of other questions. I'm going to have to interrupt you again, Gary. I'm sorry. We have another break, final break of the show. And you're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on CBS New Sky Radio with our guest, Gary Heseltine, and we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Enlighten, empower, enrich. This is CBS Radio's The New Sky. New horizons, no boundaries.
my point of view, you think that I'm insane. It's not sane. It's not sane. I just want someone to save me. I'll always be there when you're away. Yeah, you know I like to keep my cheeks dry today. So stay with me and I'll have it made. I'll have it made. I'll have it made. No, you know I'm really gonna have it made. You know I'll have it made.
Psychic Radio is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Call now 248-545-SOUL. New skyradio.com.
Welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno with our guest, Gary Heseltine. We are talking of the citizens' hearings held in the U.S. and
In Washington, yeah.
in Washington, and maybe even going to, sort of a mock trial, maybe even going to the UN after this.
Well, there is, Gary, some other point of view here. I'm looking at a quote from Alexandra Petri of the Washington Post, who apparently was at the hearings. Quote, "The event reminded me of trying to climb into an M.C. Escher painting. Once you're climbing up the never-ending dream stairs, you can keep going in a circular movement forever," unquote. I'm not entirely sure what she means, but it doesn't sound all that wonderful. Again, that's a typical comment, not only from skeptics, but from some of my colleagues in the media. I also understand that the members of Congress were paid to be there. I mean, what say you?
I would have thought, and I might be wrong in this, that anybody of sufficiently high status in the world of politics will probably get appearance fees for turning up and opening a supermarket.
Yeah, that's
so I really don't see the issue there. But of course, the sceptical media have got to have something to go at, so they concentrate on 20 grand. For me, it's what the hell? The point is, they did not come into that as believers in any way whatsoever, and you had to be there. And this is what I say. When there was one particular moment where Congressman Merrill Cook, I think it was the Thursday, the fourth day of the hearings, he heard testimony from a pilot called Colonel Oscar Santamaria of Peru, who basically was sent up to get into a dogfight with a UFO, a structured machine that outpaced his aircraft, and he shot 64 rounds of it, which didn't affect it in any way, performed amazing manoeuvres, and I think it lasted something like 20 minutes, the dogfight. He couldn't get near it, and this was in daylight. And so, that's pretty spectacular. And Congressman Merrill Cook, who had been, I think, holding on to the belief that there had to be other explanations, when he heard that testimony, if you looked at his body language, his jaw was on the floor. Because there you have testimony from a direct witness who's had millions of dollars or equivalent spent on his flight education with thousands of hours, saying to him that he flew a plane that shot at a UFO that he couldn't get near, that it was structured, blah, blah, blah. Now, you can't get better testimony than that, and that's why his jaw was on the floor. So when you kind of were there and saw that, there's no two ways about it. Those people at the end were, I think by day two, it was almost brain overload, because none of them expected the depth of the quality of the evidence that we presented by pilots, by military officials, by police officers, etc., etc. It was brilliant. And where else would you ever hear a debate, hypothetical or not? Where else would you get a senator or congressman talking about UFOs shooting planes and vice versa? You'd never get that in the mainstream. So I'd have given them $50,000 if it got them into that debate. And
well, I tend to agree.
It was brilliant.
This is what I hear as well. That when people who are usually not exposed to this in positions of responsibility and leadership,
they didn't
are
have
exposed to. They do. They are overwhelmed by it.
Absolutely. They did not have a clue. Honestly, they did not have a clue. They were nice, proper people who went into that thinking, yeah, I'm going to listen to a bit of evidence, so-called evidence. And by day two, you could see them. They were almost, I would say, resigned, almost to the point of embarrassment that what we were showing them was factual in nature, wasn't made up by lunatics, and it was all evidential. Well, for me as a police officer, that's what we should do. And at one point in my testimony during the Q&A, I actually said, when I think it was Congressman Woolsey, got into a philosophical debate of where they're from, blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, we're here for 5 days to talk about the evidence. This is our one chance to present the evidence. So that's what we should focus on. And that was important. And honestly, it was brilliant. And the fact that the mainstream media want to poke fun at it is because they have to work to an agenda.
That's true.
And there is a absolutely clear link. It's not conspiratorial. It's a clear evidential link to show that in 1953, the Robertson panel said we're going to engage with the media to dumb down this subject. And ever since, that's what's happened. So that's what they do. And the people that are right just carry on the line thinking, well, there's nothing to it. Well, there will never be anything to it unless somebody takes a stand and says there is something to it. And that was our opportunity to create a window of opportunity to present some evidence. That's why it was worth paying 20 grand just to get them in that room. I would have paid 50 grand.
Okay.
Jeez. Well, considering we have about less than 4 minutes left, and I guess I'll bring up this one point. Last time we had Steve Bassett on. Actually, we had him on a few times, but we posed a question to him saying, if the government really does know anything about UFOs, suppose the truth is so terrible that people wouldn't be able to handle it, would you still want disclosure?
Yes, for the simple reason is I think there were genuine grounds after the Second World War that if Roswell was real, which I believe was real, that they suddenly became definitely aware that someone was watching us from afar, then that could be a game changer. There'd be the fear of a Third World War. They were into the Cold War era. I think there may well have been genuine reasons then for keeping the subject secret. But after the collapse of the Soviet Empire, early 91, 92, then it doesn't add up anymore. And I think in the end, what Steve says is absolutely right. I think the people can handle it now. And all the Gallup polls that are run every few years come back 60, 70% saying we believe that there is something being covered up. But it doesn't make sense. So, yes, I think we should be told.
Well, Gary, we're flat out of time here, and we're definitely going to have you back because we have a lot of deeper questions about the
Anytime
phenomenon.
you put me on,
we'd love to get you. We'd love to get you on again about that. So, everybody, Gary Heseltine, UFOTruthMagazine.com. Check it out. Gary, we'll be in touch with you off the air, and we'll get something going here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for staying up so late.
No problem. It's a pleasure.
All right, so check out our websites, BehindTheParanormal.com, where you can find nearly 500 free podcasts of all of our past shows. Also, check out our site at www.NewEnglandGhosts.com, where there are case studies and photos along with articles by my dad.
And if you buy my books on either of those sites, you will help keep those podcasts free.
So many thanks to our producer, Brandon Jackson, and we will see you right here next week, where we will have an open line show. Excuse my grammar. So get your questions in via the online form at BehindTheParanormal.com or email to paul@BehindTheParanormal.com.
And in the meantime, tune into our Boston Providence Drive Time show on WOON 1240 AM and ONWorldwide.com at 6 p.m. Eastern Time every Monday. And check out, again, those lots and lots of podcasts, 500 of them at BehindTheParanormal.com. We leave you this evening with a thought from the great British author C.S. Lewis. If the whole universe has no meaning, why we should never have found out that it has no meaning. Just as if there were no light in the universe and therefore no creatures with eyes, we should never know it was dark. Dark would be without meaning. I'm Paul Eno.
I'm Ben Eno, and thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we shall see you next time.